Hey everyone, I'm coming to you from my car today, and I'm typically unscripted, but even more like today is very unscripted. I just want to genuinely share some updates, and it's not bad. The people pleaser in me is like, we're gonna lay that down and we're just gonna be real with like things that those who are close to me know where I stand or where the Lord has been working in my life and stuff. But there are others who I kind of like keep things hidden away because I don't like conflict or different things, and by that this probably sounds like a really dramatic live when it's not. I actually wanted to share something, a testimony, I guess you would say, something really cool that happened, but it intertwines with something that I've been very quiet about. I feel like maybe other people, you never know how people are perceiving you from the other side of the screen. So if you're watching, say hello. Feel free to ask questions on topic to help keep the video kind of on that. But okay, so about a week ago, I had the privilege of reconnecting with some really beautiful friends who are basically family. And several weeks before that, they had reached out to me and asked if I would be their doula for a second time. I was a doula for their first birth, and it was so much fun. They're a really fun couple, Christian couple, and they're deep thinkers. And so, a lot of times we would go from talking about birth to talking about like the church and, our history as individuals, where we are in our walk with the Lord and all of that. So obviously, given, our loss of Gideon and my experience with that, they were very, they wanted to wait to ask me, but they knew they wanted me to be their doula again, which I was definitely honored by that. So when they announced that they were expecting, and they know this, so I'm just telling them, we've already talked about this, but when they had announced it, I was so excited, and immediately my mind was like, if they choose not to go with me, that's totally fine. It is not uncommon for women to, if their birth didn't go how they wanted it to go, whether, it be for a small thing or something really big or whatever, or they just want to try something different, the second time around, they might hire a completely different team. And so I already was like, I'm not going to be offended or upset or whatever if they don't reach out and ask me. But I was, secretly like, that would be so cool, because I haven't had the privilege to do that as of yet. So when they reached out, here's where we get into like where it intertwines with some things where I'm like, oh, okay. So when I got the text from the mom, I was like, yes. Well, I don't think I even said yes immediately. I was just like, first of all, I'm incredibly honored that you would reach out to me. To be honest, as a lost mom, I question whether people will want to work with me given my loss. Like, there's a lot of myths and, I don't know, just misconceptions and narratives that can come with, like, sometimes I can feel like a bad luck charm instead of a good luck charm. And not that I believe in charms, but like, if that makes any sense of, anyway. There's kind of that narrative for myself, and I don't know how it is for other people. So I wasn't sure if they would even consider me just because of that, because of my loss. Like, I felt kind of tainted by that as a birth worker. And so for them to reach out was like such a gift. And of course, before I even responded, I reached out to my husband and I was like, hey, here's a situation. They're like family. I can't say no. I didn't put it like that, but he was like, are you asking me or telling me? And I said, I'm asking and kind of telling because I want to say yes. And I know I have to work out the logistics and all of that. And he was like, yeah, go for it. So, yes. So I texted her and I was like, I'm honored by that. I, would love to be your doula again. There have been lots of changes because that was almost 4 years ago. But for sure 3 years ago. And a lot has changed in my life. And, I've changed a lot as a human being. I've changed a lot as a Christian since, 3 years ago. So, especially in my birth work as well. And so, I just said, I would love to get together. Let's just reconnect, see where we are, and kind of see if I'm still a good fit for you. So she was like, yeah, totally. For her, it was kind of like, you're the one. There's no doubt. But in my mind, I'm like, girl, you don't know the bomb I'm about to drop. So, with that being said, yes. So, we met last week, finally. I went to their house and, she had dinner and it was the most delicious. I don't even know what it was called, but it was so good and I need to get the recipe from her. I didn't get to finish it all and I was like, can I get a to-go box? Because I still want to eat this. But we got caught up in so much conversation. I think I was there maybe 3 or 4 hours, to be quite honest, which isn't unusual with them. Because just you put the 3 of us in a room and it's just gonna happen that way. So anyway, what else? So basically, here's the update that I gave them and what I'm gonna publicly kind of share here. And I'm choosing to share it here first. I may do a more formal video on it that can be shareable, but I struggle to talk about these things because these are matters of personal conviction and matters of there can be disagreement on the conclusions that I've come to, and that's okay. It's okay for us to have different conclusions about it, but this is what I'm sharing is where I've landed on this and why I no longer choose to practice or support this. So, when I was active in my birth work before I stopped several years ago, things have picked up obviously, I chose to become an instructor with a specific program that used hypnosis for birth. And it was something that I used for my own births, for one of my own births, and I had a positive experience at the time. And it was when I was trying to figure out a way that I could help bring an income to my family as we transitioned out of one career into essentially starting over as a whole. I knew that I wanted to do birth work, and so part of that was knowing if I'm going to do birth work and if I'm going to be known or recognized, I should have some kind of name or training or something that will help me kind of get my foot in the door. And so when I did that, I chose to become a doula and childbirth educator through the program that I had used. My time doing that as a doula was, I loved it. I was passionate about it. I was wholeheartedly all for the use of hypnosis for birth, specifically with this program. I'm not familiar with how other programs use it. And it was something that if you would have asked those who I worked with, if I really believed in it, they would tell you like, oh, hands down, she is like, this is her thing. If you talk to her about childbirth, it will come up. And so when the pandemic hit, and I chose to step back fully from birth work, and I switched to homeschooling and all of that, the Lord really used that time to mold me, correct me, discipline me, through His Word and through solid teaching and preaching and all of that. And so there were some other dynamics at play in our family at the time as well, with our marriage and just things going on with me individually, professional relationships that I was in that were not healthy, places where I had relinquished my free will and just kind of handed it over and said, whatever you tell me is what I'm going to do, to another person. And it led to a lot of really harmful decisions and hurt to me, and trusting my gut and trusting those who I was in a relationship with, within my family and things like that. And so maybe one day I'll share more about that. But there was some of that at play as well during this time. And so I was talking with someone, I think it was one of my sisters, and they had shared, there's this really great documentary, you should check it out. And it wasn't even as like, hey, I see you're struggling, check this out. It was more of like, hey, I watched this, it was really powerful, you should watch it. And so one day, I was like, well, I have nothing to do, let me watch that. And I watched this American gospel documentary, and I mean, the Holy Spirit just used that in a way to convict me and to show me like how much my life was not on the right path. Not like, I don't even want to say on the right path, but like I was far from what, biblically it meant to be under the lordship of Christ, and what it meant to truly be a follower of Him, and all of those things. And, I was far from, the church we were at the time was very much far from teaching a biblical gospel. And so that day, like after I watched that documentary, I just got on my hands and knees and I prayed and repented, and I was like, Lord, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't want to mess my life up. I don't know what I'm doing. I need your help. Walk me through this. Help me. Forgive me. I confessed things to Him that I was very prideful of, and was hard to like admit, I was wrong. I screwed it up here. And anyway, so that happened. I shared the documentary with my husband, and we talked about it, and ended up moving to a different church, which was really helpful for us in that season as we transitioned into solid teaching, and then landed at the church we're at today, primarily because we wanted something with solid teaching for our children and classes where they could connect, and the other church just wasn't there quite yet at the level that our family was needing. And so during that time, I was debating whether or not I would continue my birth work. I had put it on pause for obvious reasons. Doulas weren't being allowed back into the hospital, and they were limiting numbers on who could be at births and stuff like that, and primarily the births I was attending was in the hospital. And I remember the day that someone shared the announcement in a doula Facebook group that I'm part of and said, great news, doulas are being let back into the hospital. And I started crying. I started bawling my eyes out because I did not want to go back. And that's connected to a couple of things. The last, I saw some very traumatic things that I was not in agreement with, and that I felt was not consented to, and that kind of stuff. And it was just really like, no, I don't want to do all of that again. And I was in this dilemma of having to decide, was I even going to continue? And like that moment, I knew I didn't want to, and I wasn't in a place to yet. So, my husband and I talked about it because that was bringing in income for our family. And, we made the switch to homeschooling. I stayed home, all of that. And the big question was, would I continue? So if I'm not going to do doula work, will I still teach classes? And for a little bit, that was kind of like, I won't do doula work, I'll just teach classes, and that'll be fine because I can schedule that. That can be for a set time, set days, and everything. And I felt like that was much more manageable for our family as well, because childcare was starting to get a bit difficult to arrange at the last minute. And finally, I just kept asking the Lord to help me to know if teaching this specific type of childbirth education, specifically using hypnosis, was still the right thing. There were a few, toward the end of my teaching of this curriculum, there were a few incidents and things that I witnessed that I was kind of like, oh, this is a bit beyond me. I'm not, I don't know what's happening here. This is really weird. There was an occasion where I wasn't able to get someone out of hypnosis for a bit. They were still in it no matter how many times I kept trying to bring them up. And eventually, obviously they did, but typically they would come out of hypnosis almost immediately once I brought them out. But this person wasn't for 2 or 3 times. And, another incident where someone had shared, after the fact, that although on the outside it seemed like things were going well, they were personally really struggling because they weren't comfortable in the positions that they were in. And as much as they were hearing us say, wow, you're doing such a great job, and complimenting them, it was, they weren't okay. And that was surprising to me. And so I was really grappling with that. A big part of why people specifically hired me was because I was a Christian. I shared that, in hindsight, I would say things and put things much more different. I would say things differently. I wouldn't leave out that I'm a Christian. I would just define what that means when I categorize myself as a Christian. And there's several reasons for that. But most of the people who hired me because I was an instructor in this hypnosis curriculum and I was Christian. So I shared with my friends this past week, who also use this curriculum. that I encouraged them to do. I had shared with them, like, in hindsight, as I look back, I think that there was this kind of, oh, well, if she's a Christian and she's solid, then I can trust that this curriculum is good for me as a Christian. I want to emphasize that this is for Christians who are seeking to honor God in all that they do, and who are trying to be super intentional in everything that they involve themselves in and everything like that. Okay, so that's who I believe, and based on my interactions with them, the majority, not all, I didn't always have Christian couples, but the majority of those who did, that's kind of where they were at. And I felt confident, at the time when I was teaching it, saying like, oh yeah, it's totally good, totally safe, nothing to worry about. But after, again, those two experiences where the person didn't feel in control, one person I couldn't even bring out from hypnosis for a few minutes, I started to question, like, And what's funny, and the long story is going to get longer, so if there's anything you learn about me, if you're a follower of me, is I'm going to get into the details. Those things are important to me, so there. I'm just going to leave it at that. The couple that I'm working with now, I remember them saying to me as well, oh, we shared with our friends that we're going to be doing this, and they're like, oh, that's new age. And I was like, psh, what? No, they don't understand. This is how God created our minds. This is like such a beautiful thing. This is just the beauty of, like, we don't understand and blah, blah, blah. And so I was very much like, I knew that there were Christians who didn't support this and that considered it new age, but I was totally like, that's not the case. You can even look on the website, for the curriculum, and they talk directly to that, where it's not anything you have to be concerned about, right? So this is where we're going to get into the weeds of, like, there's going to be disagreement, okay? It's okay. We're going to disagree, but this is where I, in my conviction, have landed on this. So during that time, I was like, I don't know about this. Is it really? Let me do some research, because I'm putting my name with this and saying, I, as a Christian, think this is fine for other Christians. And I take that responsibility as what I consider a leadership role in people's lives as a birth worker. I take it seriously. It's not something that I take, nonchalantly. So I ended up trying to do some research on it. And every time that I would Google or research and stuff like that, everything was on the fence. It was like, well, it could be dangerous in this situation, or I'm not sure that dangerous is the right word, but it could be, leading in a new age direction in this direction if you're using it for this purpose, but if you're using it in this context and it's with the good, person who you can trust and whatever, then, then maybe that's safer because it is known to be helpful to the, neurologically and blah, blah, blah. But it was like, just use discernment, basically, is what a lot of them would lead to. Use discernment, and be mindful, just be aware. And if you know me, I tend to be a black and white kind of person. I don't like gray areas. And if I have to choose a side, then I'm going to go with, like, the extreme. That is the safest extreme. Because I would rather be on that end than be on the super, whatever risks come with it situation and end up in trouble. That's me. So I started to really question, like, I don't know. I was on the fence. I would talk to my husband about it, like, I'm not really sure. And I'm a verbal processor, so we'd process things out together. And then there was just one night where I was like, you know what? I don't feel like I can comfortably say either way if it's right or wrong for Christians to use. So I feel like because of, at that time, again, after watching that documentary and really being convicted and about some things, especially when it came to the gospel and trying to be super mindful and aware of protecting my witness as a Christian to other people. I didn't want to not know or be in this like, if you want to, if not. So I finally decided that I just wasn't going to continue teaching it. And so, it was just a matter of like, I just want to honor God. And because I'm not sure, I would rather not do it at all than risk possibly dishonoring and teaching false teachings to people under the name of Christ, which I consider using the Lord's name in vain. So I stopped teaching it like I put in my letter, and I thanked them for the opportunity. It was a positive experience as far as that goes, under training and things like that. I found it to be a successful business decision when I started it and all of that. I did really well in my business. And yeah, it was a difficult decision to make, but it was one that I knew I needed to, personally. So it wasn't until the next day that I was like, you know what, let me just keep researching, because people might ask me and I want to have an answer. I want to be prepared to give an answer. And so I started researching, and I finally came across a website that kind of went deeper into some scripts, I guess you could say, that used color in particular and to help manifest things and all of that. And so I read through the scripts, and when I read through them, I personally, this is for me, this is my personal conviction and where I have been in my journey. When I read through it, it was very similar to this kind of scripts that I was, using with clients. I wouldn't say like word for word, but as far as like the approach, the technique, and all of that, it was a hypnosis script. And it identified itself as such from what I can recall. But it was trying to do a completely different thing. So, but that was for me like the final straw of like, yeah, I definitely gonna lay that aside because I don't even want to have anything that hints at being part of or similar to something that isn't God honoring. And so all of that was what I shared with my friends last week as I brought them up to speed with, listen, I would love to be your doula, but I need you to know that I actually no longer teach this specific use of hypnosis for childbirth. And I view, personally, I do view what I was specifically using as part of New Age practice, and it's not something that I can, as a Christian, say, yeah, go for it. If a Christian were to ask me, is this something safe for me to use? I would say I wouldn't even, like, here's the story, here's where I'm at, here's where I've landed, do with it what you will, basically. And if you choose, and go to the website if you decide that's what you want to do and you would like to pursue someone else, which is totally fine, and I respect, people's decision to do that. Well, all of that to say, and let me pause for just a minute to let you know that it wasn't the hypnosis for me wasn't just a part of what I was teaching. I do want to say that it was getting to a point where I was becoming solely reliant on hypnosis to help me with anxiety, depression, just a lot of things where I would just check out, put in my headphones and listen to hypnosis and basically float away in order to get that high that could bring me back and feel like I could come back to earth. And so I was very dependent. I was becoming very reliant on hypnosis beyond teaching it. And beyond the purposes of the class as well. And that's part of the reason too why I was hesitant, where I noticed I was leaning on hypnosis rather than leaning on the Lord and using man-made tools to support myself rather than going to scripture and things like that. So all of that to say, I was quite nervous to meet with my friends and to tell them about this, because I didn't know, as brothers and sisters in Christ of different denominations and all of that, we're gonna differ on secondary, tertiary things. And I didn't know where they would be spiritually in this stuff. And I won't get into too much of the details because that's their story. But I just wanted to testify that I went in so nervous and left there so blessed and encouraged, and just because what the Lord had been doing in my life and my family's life, He had also been working in their life over these last 3 years. And as far as like where we are in our convictions and things like that, like we've been on a very similar path of the Lord just showing us like, this is not of me, come get back to my word. And so before I could even let like the whole story out, and I said, we haven't even gotten it, because we had been talking about church hurt and we, just all kinds of stuff that I had been sharing from my experience of things I had, walked through, and telling them like all these updates about things that we had been through. And I said, and we haven't even gotten into the curriculum that I used to teach and using hypnosis. And they were like, what? You have to know them to be able to visualize that. But they have this, they just look at each other and they ask, is it New Age? And I was like, I think so. Like, that's my conviction. And it was just an answer to prayer for her, like, because her prayer has been, and I think she would be okay with me saying this, to glorify the Lord. Her prayer has just been, Lord, help me to not be deceived, as she's learning things and getting back into God's word and stuff. Like, help me to not be deceived. And so, there's just a moment where she's in tears and I'm tearing up, and it's just this beautiful thing of like, I said to them, like, you know what, for as much as the Lord has shown up in my life over all these years, I really should not be surprised right now. I shouldn't. And yet I am. And yet I was still anxious, and I was still nervous about what was this conversation going to be like, and all of this, and feeling like I needed to be ready to defend my position and be ready to do all this stuff. And when instead it was like, I just was honest, and they were like, we're there with you, like, we're in that too. And praise God that like that the timing of all of this is the way that it is. And so yeah, a really cool thing that's coming out of that is that now I'm working on creating my own little curriculum guide that I can use and share with those who I work with. And that it can be more like having portions of it include like ways to pray about this, you know, where we can go to scripture to be encouraged, you know, and be reminded of the Lord giving us strength and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I've been carrying that, and, you know, the whole update on why I don't teach hypnosis for birth anymore for years now. And only those really close to me know that story. You know, when I was joining Women in Apologetics as a volunteer for them several years ago, that was part of, you know, they saw that I had been teaching that. That was part of my thing. And my sweet, now she's, you know, like a dear friend to me. But at the time, it was just like the person who was gonna be my boss, who I was totally intimidated by. She, you know, after I was nervous going into the interview for that, and I remember, because I was just fresh off of this and I knew they were gonna see that. And so when I went into the interview, I told them, like, the Lord has been doing a work, this is where I'm at, you may see this. And it was like they almost didn't even consider me because of that, because they didn't know where I was at. And so, you know, my friend will share, like, her side of the story was when they saw everything, and then when they saw my, I guess, my application, it was like, okay, this looks great. But then when they saw my social media, she was kind of like, oh, I don't know. But she said, let me just ask her some questions, I guess. And before they could even ask, I told them, like, this is a deal and where I've landed on that. And I was in. Sadly, I'm not in it right now, as much as that needed to be the case under the circumstances. But I just loved my season as a volunteer and employee at WIA, and that the Lord used that time. Like, and this is what I shared with my friends, how these last few years God has just used Women in Apologetics, used the churches we've been part of to help shape and disciple our family, but even me individually, in just, you know, bringing me to where I am today, and in, like, restructuring how I even approach walking into the birth room. And that includes, like, my experience of, you know, my stillbirth with my son Gideon. And you know, I forget, I have new people, I see some new faces in here of people I've connected with. There's people who know our story, people who don't. But losing Gideon also brought a whole different perspective to my work as a doula, as a birth assistant, as a future midwife. And, you know, before I get to the midwife, as a future labor and delivery nurse, like, just all the things. And so, while it's difficult conversations to be had and things to share and stuff like that, updates to be made, it's also, like, been one of the greatest journeys, most healing journeys, that the Lord has taken me on. And I'm just so thankful, and wanted to share that, because I've been, like I said, I've been carrying parts of this story for several years, other parts just over the last week. And, like, how do I talk about this? How do I start to break the ice on this conversation? You know, I know that there are people, especially in my circle of birth work friends, who, you know, might disagree with me. And that's okay. Like, it's okay for us to disagree, you know, and there's no judgment whatsoever if some other Christians choose to do this. This is just, these are my hesitations. This is where I've landed on it. And, you know, I would hope that if there are couples who, you know, who are looking for a Christian childbirth educator, or doula, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'm even starting back at doula work, but, like, someone to at least talk to, that they would feel confident, you know, sending them my way to have those conversations and just talk through some of those things, because those moms are out there too. those moms that these conversations really matter. And for me, those are the moms that I want to serve. Those are the families that I want to come alongside with and just, help them not only have a healthy birth and baby and, healthy mom, but also to spiritually, feel like they were able to connect with the Lord even more through the whole experience of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, but grow in their walk and dependence with the Lord as well. So if you watch this whole thing, thank you. My account is private, so it's not shareable, but maybe at some point I'll do something that is shareable on my YouTube channel or something like that. Bye.